I'm 99 years old, and if you asked me what changed my life, I wouldn't tell you about a kind man or a lucky day or a moment where everything finally went right. It was the opposite. It was someone I spent years calling the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I believed that for a long time, long enough that I built my life around it. I was 27 when I married him, that age where you still think you understand people, but you don't. He wasn't charming in the way stories describe. No grand gestures, no promises that sounded too perfect. He was quiet, direct, a little hard, if I'm honest. And that should have been my first sign. But I didn't know what I was looking for back then. I just wanted something stable, something that didn't feel uncertain. The first year was calm, not happy in a loud way, just steady. We didn't fight much. We didn't talk deeply either. We just lived side by side, and I told myself that was enough. The change didn't come suddenly. It never does. It came in small moments, so small. I almost missed them. He didn't like the way I spoke to people, said I was too soft, too willing to adjust. At first, I laughed it off, thought he was just being serious, different from me. Then he started correcting me, not loudly, not angrily, just directly. Don't say yes so quickly. Why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything. Speak clearly, simple things, but repeated enough, they start to stay with you. I didn't like it. I won't pretend I did. It made me uncomfortable because it forced me to look at myself in a way I never had before. I had spent most of my life trying to avoid conflict, trying to keep things smooth, easy, and suddenly I was living with someone who didn't allow that. He noticed everything, every hesitation, every time I held back, every time I chose silence instead of honesty, and he would say it out loud. You're afraid to say what you think. I remember the first time he said that. I felt angry, offended, because I didn't see it that way. I thought I was being kind, considerate, but he saw something else. He saw fear. I didn't accept that, not at first. I told myself he was too harsh, too cold, and slowly, I started calling him something in my mind. A difficult man, a hard man, a man who made my life harder than it needed to be. That's how it begins, not with hate, but with a quiet label. And once you label someone like that, everything they do starts to fit that image, even when it doesn't. Years passed, and that pattern continued. He would point things out. I would resist. He would challenge me. I would withdraw. We didn't have explosive fights. We had something quieter, distance. But in that distance, something else was happening, something I didn't recognize at the time. I was changing, not because I wanted to, because I was being pushed, slowly, uncomfortably, into a version of myself I hadn't met before. There was one moment I remember clearly. We were at a small gathering, nothing special, just a few people. Someone asked me a question, a simple one, and I started answering the way I always did, carefully, trying not to offend anyone, trying to say the right thing. He interrupted me, not loudly, but enough. Say what you actually think, he said, in front of everyone. I felt my face heat up. I wanted to disappear. That feeling, it stayed with me. And that night I was furious, not because of what he said, because of how exposed I felt. I told myself he embarrassed me, that he didn't respect me, that he made me feel small. And maybe, in that moment, he did. But what I didn't see then was something else. For the first time, I had noticed myself, not the version I showed others, the real one, and I didn't like it. It's easier to blame someone else than to face something inside you. So I chose the easier path. I made him the villain of my story. And for years, I held on to that because it made things simpler. If he was the problem, I didn't have to change. And I didn't. Not for a long time. But life has a way of repeating things until you understand them. And I hadn't understood anything yet. Not really. I was still living the same way, avoiding discomfort, avoiding truth, until something happened that didn't leave me a choice anymore. And that's when everything began to shift. It didn't happen in a dramatic way, no big event, no single moment where everything suddenly made sense. It was quieter than that. I started noticing patterns, not in him, in myself. The way I avoided certain conversations. The way I agreed even when I didn't mean it. The way I adjusted before anyone even asked me to. And once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. It becomes obvious, almost uncomfortable. There was a morning I remember, clearer than most. We were having tea, no rush, no noise, just the two of us. And he asked me a simple question. "What do you want?" I laughed, because it sounded like a strange question. "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't change his expression. "I mean, what do you want? Not what's easy, not what's expected. What do you actually want?" And I didn't have an answer, not a real one. I said something small, something safe, but he shook his head. "That's not an answer," he said. And for the first time, I felt something shift, because he was right. I didn't know. I had spent so many years adjusting to everything around me that I had stopped asking myself that question. That realization didn't feel empowering. It felt empty, like I had been living a life without fully being in it. And I didn't like that feeling. So again, I pushed it away, blamed him, told myself he was making things complicated. But the truth had already settled somewhere inside me, and it didn't leave. Days passed, weeks, and I started noticing something else. When he spoke, I listened differently. Not because I agreed, because I was trying to understand. Not him, my reaction to him, why his words bothered me so much, why I felt exposed, why I felt defensive. And slowly, the answer became clear. It wasn't just him. It was me. The version of myself I had never questioned. The one that avoided discomfort. The one that chose peace over truth. The one that stayed quiet, even when it shouldn't. That's not kindness. That's fear. And once you see that, it changes things. Not immediately, but slowly. I started speaking more. Not loudly, not aggressively, just honestly. Small things at first. Saying no, expressing a different opinion, not apologizing for things that weren't mine. And every time I did, it felt uncomfortable, but also real. And something surprising happened. He didn't push back. He listened. That confused me, because I had built this image of him. A difficult man, a hard man, a man who made things worse. But in those moments, he didn't look like that. He looked steady, almost like he had been waiting for me to arrive somewhere. And I didn't know what to do with that. Because if he wasn't the villain, then who had I been blaming all those years? That question stayed with me. And it wasn't comfortable. We didn't suddenly become a perfect couple. That's not how life works. We still disagreed. We still had distance, but something had changed. I was present now, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, and that made everything feel different. Then one evening, he said something that stayed with me more than anything else. "I never wanted to change you," he said. I looked at him. "Then why did you push me like that?" I asked. He paused. "Because you were hiding," he said. That sentence, it stayed. Not because it hurt, because it was true. And truth has a different weight. You don't argue with it. You sit with it. And slowly, you understand it. I wasn't being controlled. I was being confronted with myself. And that's much harder, because there's no one else to blame. From that point on, I stopped calling him the villain. Not because he became perfect, because I finally saw clearly he didn't break my life. He exposed parts of it I had ignored, and that's what changed everything. Now, at 99, when I look back at my life, I don't see heroes and villains the way I used to. I see moments, patterns, choices, and I see how easily we misunderstand the people who challenge us, because they don't make us comfortable. They make us aware. And awareness isn't always gentle. It doesn't come wrapped in kindness. Sometimes it comes in the form of someone who refuses to let you stay the same. And that's what he was. Not kind in the way I expected, but honest. And honesty can feel like cruelty when you're not ready for it. We spent many years together. Not perfect years, but real ones. Years where I slowly became someone I hadn't known before. Someone who spoke, who chose, who didn't disappear in every situation. And I owe that to the man I once called the worst thing in my life. That's the part people don't understand. Growth doesn't always come from comfort. Sometimes it comes from friction, from being challenged, from being seen more clearly than you see yourself. And that's uncomfortable. Most people run from that. I almost did. But life doesn't always give you another version of the same lesson. Sometimes it gives you one person and asks you to pay attention. I didn't at first. I resisted. I blamed. I created a story where I was right, and he was wrong. But stories like that don't last, because truth has a way of returning, quietly, consistently, until you stop ignoring it. Now, when I think about him, I don't feel anger. I don't feel regret either. I feel understanding and something close to gratitude. Not for the discomfort, for what it revealed. If you're listening to me, I won't tell you to look for difficult people. Life brings them on its own. But I will say this: not everyone who makes your life harder is your enemy. Some people are showing you something you haven't been willing to see. And the longer you resist that, the longer you stay the same. I stayed the same for years, until I didn't. And that change, it didn't come from kindness. It came from confrontation, from truth, from someone who refused to let me hide. I'm 99 years old, and the person I once called the villain of my life is the reason I finally understood it.